Hi, I'm Scott. Welcome to Synth Stuff, and it brings me no joy to tell you the story of the downfall of Modal Electronics from an insider's view. Coming up. Modal Electronics has been around for quite a few years. They kind of transitioned from a very exclusive analog high-end synthesizer. You know, we're talking like a $5,000 analog synthesizer or hybrid synths like the Modal 001 to synths like this, the Modal Cobalt 8, which I really love the Cobalt 8. I love my Modal synth. The Cobalt 8 is a new paradigm in synthesis in terms of UI. I really like, yes, it sounds great. I really like the modeled filters. I really like the way they set up the UI. It was really thoughtful, and the Modal app is by far the best companion app for a synthesizer I've ever seen. Every company that makes synthesizers, you hear me, Roland, needs to study the Modal app and do basically the same thing, because Modal really got it right. You can basically set up a tablet next to your Modal app and give you an extended interface into the synthesizer that works in real time, or you can do it on your computer, and it's free. You just get it along with the synthesizer. Modal brought out the Argon 8 and the Cobalt 8, both in module, a 37 key and this, I think it's a 61 key, with FATAR keybed, really high quality FATAR keybed with aftertouch. And at a price point that just blew away the competition. So what happened to Modal? Well, if you've been anywhere in the synth world this week, you've noticed the news stories about Modal going into insolvency, which is basically the UK equivalent of bankruptcy protection. This came about because of filings with Companies House, which is a government organization in the UK that manages the incorporation and dissolving of LLCs, corporate limited companies in the UK. So a administration notice got posted for Modal Electronics saying, hey, it's in administration, we're winding up the company. Modal then scrambled and said, well, actually, no, we're just reorganizing. Everything's fine, nothing to see here, we're all good. So what's really happening? Unfortunately, it's not good news. Now I'm going to go back about a year and give you some information that is from an inside source. I did have some dealings with Modal directly with some of their engineers at one point. Everybody I talked to at Modal was fantastic. I really enjoyed working with them. I will say that off the top of my head. This is coming third-party information from an ex-employee who recently left Modal. So take this with whatever grain of salt you wish. I do consider this person to be a reliable source. I have no reason to question any of this information. I've decided not to include everything he told me because there were some personality differences, shall we say, that don't really, well, they do factor into it, but I'm not going to get into that. And there were some other things that would probably identify who this person was, and I don't want to drop them in it. So I'm going to leave it to more or less generic information that he passed me that could be coming from any employee. So the problem with Modal is that they have never made money. In fact, they've lost money for years and years and years. They've gone into massive debt as a result. That didn't stop them from creating these synthesizers in hope that they were going to sell and bring the company up out of debt. And to back up the more entry-level synths, the Cobalt 8 and Argon 8, they were creating a successor to the Modal 002, the classic 002, and it was codenamed Radon. It was a hybrid digital analog synth. It contained both a Cobalt and an Argon engine in it. It had 16 voices, Moog ladder filters, analog oscillators. It was a true analog digital hybrid. However, they made some poor decisions on who was going to be doing the engineering of certain parts of it, and as a result, the prototype didn't function and had no hope of functioning, and that was back in spring of 2022. At that point, they had spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds on development costs of the synthesizer, and they basically had something that was not workable. Modal was having severe financial difficulties at this point, and CEO Philip Tayson decided that they could not meet payroll. So there were several times where there were weeks and sometimes months where employees were not being paid, and as you can expect, many employees left because they're not getting paid. A few of them hung on for a little while in hopes that once some money came in, they would get some back pay. Some of them did. They weren't made whole, but at least they got some back pay. But there were great stretches where no employees were getting paid at Modal. That's always a bad sign. My source says that there's over £1 million owing to the suppliers of just the PC boards and the chip suppliers for the Cobalt 8 and the Argon 8. And the Carbon 8, which was shown at some recent synth shows, which is a new synth from Modal, is apparently an attempt to use up some of the components from the Cobalt 8 and the Argon 8 that had not sold because they had them on hand in order to raise funds. It's highly unlikely that the Carbon 8 will ever see the light of day in stores. Earlier this year, Modal signed a distributorship agreement with American Music and Sound that gives American Music and Sound the rights to distribute Modal products in the US. As part of that deal, they took an advance of $100,000 from American Music and Sound. I have a feeling that money's gone and that they will never see it. All right, so that's the information that came from my source. Now let's go to the actual information that we have direct from Companies House in the UK. First, I'm going to name a couple terms. One is a strike off. A compulsory strike off is when Companies House has decided that for one reason or another that the company is no longer functioning. It's either insolvent, it's not paying its bills, it can't function as a company, it is no longer worthy of being listed. So they file a notice of compulsory strike off, which is basically saying, hey, you're not working as a company anymore. We are going to delist you. You are no longer going to be a limited liability company. One of those reasons can be insolvency. One can be that you are not able to pay your debts. The main reason is typically that they are not filing their accounts on time. Every public company, LLC company in the UK, has to file accounts, public accounts, showing their credits and debits and basically their ledgers to show the state of the company every year. If you don't do that, it's a sign that the company is in trouble. Companies House will file a compulsory strike off against you. Sometimes the owners of companies will actually do that intentionally if they are in such debt that they have no chance of recovering, with the intention that if they don't file their accounts, Companies House will then file a compulsory strike off, delist the company, dissolve the company. And the idea is that they're going to get out of paying their debts. The problem is that Companies House in that situation can then force the company to liquidate, which means the creditors get whatever is left over of the company. I don't know if that's what's happening here. It kind of looks like it. So let's have a look at the accounts. In 2019, Modal was £978,000 in the red. They owed £740,000 owed to creditors payable within 1 year. Overall, for the year, they made a loss of £978,000. In 2020, they ended up £1.5 million in the red. They owed $1.4 million owed to creditors payable within 1 year. They made a loss of £1.4 million that year. In 2021, the last year for which we have records, the debt significantly advanced. They are now £2 million in the red, with £2.5 million owed to creditors payable within a year. They have zero cash at hand. They made a loss of £2 million. So this is a company that has made significant losses year over year over year. 2023, they did not make a filing for their 2022 financials. So what happened? Companies House ordered a compulsory strike off. That was later canceled, which can happen if the company says, hey, you know, we're filing, we're ahead of this, we will be doing it. So that actually happened, and in July, Companies House rescinded that compulsory strike off. However, just 2 months later, on September 19th, they filed a second compulsory strike off. At that point, still no accounts for 2022 had been filed. The same day, September 19th of this year, there was an administration notice, which basically means the company has gone into mandatory administration, which is bankruptcy protection. Will they emerge from bankruptcy with millions of pounds owing in debt and apparently no income to cover that, with at least 3 consecutive years of multi-million pound losses? I have a feeling that's not the case. The best case scenario is that somebody like Focusrite with deep, deep pockets can step up, buy the assets of Modal and continue making the Modal products because they are really good products. Maybe they'll take the engineers and the employees, the tech people that actually create the things and take them along with it, the people that have the intellectual property. And my hope is that that's what's going to happen, is that the Modal product line will continue and expand, and we'll see new things from Modal or whatever Modal happens in the future. The worst case is that they're forced into liquidation, the creditors come calling, they just take whatever they can get, and the intellectual property and everything else that makes up Modal today just evaporates into thin air and it's gone forever. So what do you think? This is the sad story of Modal. If you have any comments, questions, corrections especially, leave them in the comments section below. If you do like what you saw here, please click like, subscribe. I really appreciate it. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to see more like this in the future, hey, let me know. I know this is kind of a different type of video for me, but I thought because I had a little bit more insight than what is publicly known today, that I would share that insight. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.